This meeting is being recorded, Christine.
Great, thank you. So you folks on the call, again, this meeting is being recorded and a recording of the call will be posted on our website. So good morning and welcome to MassDEP's third virtual community meeting on the Massachusetts Clean Heat Standard. For those of you who have been on earlier calls, welcome back. We're happy to have you. My name is Christine Kirby. I am MassDEP's Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Air and Waste. Joining me today from the agency are Will Space, Emily Lamb, and Josh Cook of the Bureau of Air and Waste Climate Strategies Group. I'm going to turn now to Emily to cover the meeting logistics.
Sure, thanks, Christine. So as Josh mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. We've put all attendees on mute to minimize background noise, and we'd ask that you make sure that your name and affiliation, if relevant, is listed in the participants panel. You can do this by selecting the participants icon at the bottom, and then there's an option to rename yourself if you select the three dots next to your name in the list. Next slide. So there'll be opportunities to ask clarifying questions throughout the presentation, and then the latter half of this meeting will be focused on receiving substantive comments and questions. So if you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment, please use the raise your hand function. This is also in the participants panel on the bottom right, and you'll see that your hand is raised with a little blue icon next to it. When it's your turn, we'll ask you to unmute yourself, and you can ask your question or provide your comment. You can also put questions into the Q&A box, which you can find along the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll hand it back to Christine.
Thanks, Emily. So for the meeting today, after a review of the Clean Heat Standard background, we are going to provide an overview of our recent technical sessions that we held on July 24th, July 25th, and July 26th. Again, we thank folks who have been joining these calls and providing your input, really helpful. We're also going to cover the written comments we've received on the technical topics, as well as the comments that were raised on those calls that we just mentioned. Before we get to that, we want to provide some updates on the Clean Heat Standard process. And as Emily just said, we will leave plenty of time for your questions and comments. We'll turn it over to Will.
Great. Thanks, Christine, Josh, and Emily, and thanks everyone for your continued interest in this project. These virtual community meetings are intended to a general audience, and we're going to continue with our pattern of beginning by going over just some of the basic background about the program and then move into the content here. So first of all, a reminder about the stakeholder input process. We have regular virtual community meetings every 4 to 6 weeks so far, and we intend to continue or at least reboot that process as we move forward. The content really is intended for a general audience, not necessarily a technical audience, but we are trying to get people kind of caught up on the technical sessions that we held in July. And want to emphasize, as always, we're happy to get questions, suggestions, comments anytime to our climate.strategies email address. Next slide. We also want to keep reminding people, as background and understanding these things, what a clean energy standard is, or clean heat standard, excuse me. So we have gone into this in a little bit more detail in past community meetings, and those recordings are posted online. But just very briefly, I'll remind you, we're talking about a regulatory program that would apply to suppliers of heating energy, and they would comply with the program by acquiring what we're calling clean heat credits. And those credits could come from a variety of technologies potentially. But the thing that makes it us able to implement a standard is that we kind of convert all those things into a concept called these clean heat credits. And we're working on designing the details of that program, and that's what we're looking for input, as we go along through this process on. Next slide. So reminder of what's on our webpage, lots of good stuff there. links to the description of the clean heat standard concept, including a 2-page summary that's translated in a number of languages, and also a recording by the same authors of that 2-page summary. Some detailed white papers, quite technical, but covering some important potential topics related to the clean heat standard. The comments that we've seen, the written comments earlier this year, summary of those comments, and then finally, we've been posting slides and videos from our past meetings, and particularly I'd emphasize now that we have posted slides from and recordings from the technical sessions that we're talking about today. So as you think about listening today, we can't go into all the detail of a technical session, but we can point you to those videos if there's topics you're particularly interested in. Next slide. So reminder, this has been up before, but our next steps we're thinking of, we're now starting to work, noting the last bullet here, on a sort of a straw program design framework where we would lay out a little bit more about our thinking about how a clean heat standard might work. And in order to best influence that, we'd love to have a round of comments by September 1st at the latest, where the main topic might be the technical sessions we had, and also the equity mechanism presentation we had at our last virtual community meeting. But people also may want to revise or augment their earlier written comments, just listening to the discussion and comments we've had before and reacting those. So prefer to get comments by that deadline. It's not a deadline like we'd have in a regulatory process. And if you have trouble meeting that deadline, you can certainly let us know to expect comments later, but that's our hoped for schedule. Later this year, we also hope to propose fuel supplier emission reporting regulations. We showed a discussion draft of what those might look like earlier this year and got some comments, and we're hard at work on that part of the project. And also developing an early action crediting concept for the electrification projects that could earn clean heat credits. I should say the fuel supplier emissions reporting includes the reporting of biofuels that might be creditable, but we want to make sure we're moving quickly on the nuts and bolts of the electrification crediting, so that we can make sure people aren't deterred from taking early action by waiting for those requirements to come out. Next slide. So next thing I'm going to do with Emily's assistance is review the clean heat standard technical sessions. We scheduled a series of sections based on specific topics requested by stakeholders. So we didn't come up with the topics. We held them during the day in July, but we also posted the recordings of those on our website, so they're accessible to anybody, and you can skip around and watch different parts of them. We're going to do a sort of a condensed version of the presentations from those sessions today, and then allow time at the end if people have particular things you want to follow up. We're not really hoping to revisit those sections, but just to offer the opportunity for people that may not be as inclined to listen through the entire technical session, but might like some sort of high level information about those sessions. I'm going to divide up the presentation the same way we did in the technical sessions. Might help you sort of follow the plot here as I lay that out. So I'm going to focus on, during the technical sessions, we presented two things. I presented basically the starting point for our discussion document, all the documents that we've posted on the website already and what they have to do with each of the topics. And then Emily covered the comments that we've received, and she's going to reprise that role and also say a few words about the comments, what we heard at those technical sessions. Again, just to preface, Emily's part of the presentation is maybe a little more challenging because it is hard to briefly characterize the huge range and variety of comments we've gotten. So we hope you'll bear with us as we do that, and feel free to augment what we're describing through additional written comments or the discussion part of the meeting. Next slide. think we already had this one. And gone back. Very good. So the first of the technical sessions we're going to talk about was on Monday, July 24th, and we combined two topics into one longer session that stakeholders suggested because they're sort of related. The first topic was compliance flexibility in banking, and the second is basically a type of compliance flexibility that was of particular interest and has particular support among stakeholders of having an alternative compliance payment. So next slide. So this is kind of summarizing what we came to the stakeholder process with as far as thoughts about compliance flexibility. Compliance flexibility is important to limit potential costs of the problem and of the program, and then also address variability in the sort of demand and supply of credits that might be caused by weather, which is a particular issue, obviously, for the heating sector compared to electrification or electricity or transportation. So three of the topics, the credit banking and borrowing, multi-year compliance period, and the transferring of credits are kind of really about the credit marketing, and they're fairly detailed ideas about how once the credits are created, they can be used. There's some flexibility in how they're used, and that can help make the program kind of work more smoothly. But a particular one that's been of interest and been important in other programs is this idea of alternative compliance payments. And that the Commission on Clean Heat weighed in on the CHS. I think they raised the idea that it might include the alternative compliance payment. And I think also kind of assumed it would, and pointed out that there's kind of a balance in the alternative compliance payment question. You want to have a price that's high enough so that people prefer to create credits kind of themselves through the implementation of clean heat. So you don't want to set it too low. But on the other hand, the alternative compliance payment can be a burden on the companies and therefore businesses and ratepayers that are ultimately paying the costs of the program. So you want to make sure you're balancing it and having it serve that cost containment function also. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily for summary there. And I just want to say, I think because what we're really trying to do is summaries these meetings, we're not going to pause for questions and comments until the end of this, but so just want to preview that, but we will have time at the end for questions and discussion. So next slide and on to Emily.
Sure, thanks. So as Will said, this is a very high level summary of the written comments that we received that focused on compliance flexibility mechanisms. So there were a lot of comments that supported the general concept of including compliance flexibility along with credit banking and allowing for compliance via various different technologies. There were also commenters that brought up support for multi-year compliance periods, and then a few that raised the support for credit transfers and credit borrowing. And we can go on to the next slide. So this is just a high-level summary of what we heard at the technical session. And as Will said, you can go and listen to the whole session on our webpage if you're interested or want more detail in this. But during the technical session, we had a discussion of using the MassSAVE methodology or the social cost of carbon as starting points for how you might decide how much the ACP should cost. And then there were a variety of questions that weren't specifically focused on compliance flexibility and the ACP level, but regarding compliance by small fuel suppliers, and then raising the topic of whether emissions from electricity generation should be considered when calculating general clean heat credit values or the ACP level specifically, and requests for MassDEP to release more details as they're available. So I'll pass it back to Will for the next slide.
Great, thanks. So that was the first session on compliance flexibility and alternative client payment levels. The next session we had was on calculation of credits by technology and hybrid heat system credits. And I should have mentioned, the slides we're presenting today, other than ones about the technical sessions, are the same slides that we presented at the technical sessions. or at least some of the slides are the same in some of the graphics. So we're sort of presenting the same information in abbreviated form. One slide we didn't include, but might be useful background for this, is we got a lot of comments on what clean heat should be and how it should be defined, and found a lot of support for electrification and also for liquid biofuels, and then less support explicitly for other forms of clean heat. But this session, this technical session, was specifically not directed at sort of what should count as clean heat. We have that sort of in the broader stakeholder process, and we have a lot of comments on that, and we'll think about that more in the framework. But this was a more technical session about how would you actually calculate the number of credits for each technology. And then a particular technology that poses some challenges are hybrid heat systems, where a person installs clean heat, in this case, most likely electric heat pumps, but they still retain the ability to use an older fossil or combustion system. How would you credit that? Because it sort of haven't fully electrified, but they've installed some equipment that can reduce emissions. Next slide. So the technical challenge, and this might be our biggest technical challenge in the program, is that we need to assign a credit value to the various actions we're going to be crediting. And honestly, how challenging this is depends on how we approach the problem. And we've mentioned in the technical session that there's a number of different approaches to this, but there's sort of two basic concepts you might use here. One is used by the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard, which is a program in California. There's similar programs in other West Coast states that focus on assigning a carbon score basically to every pathway or every fuel. So even petroleum is assessed based on the where and how it's produced and the emissions from producing it, and biofuels are categorized based on what the production standards are, and whether, for example, there's carbon capture involved in the production process and how far it's transported and that sort of thing. And that program actually gives every one of these different ways of getting fuel into California transportation system a different number, so a different score. And then each fuel gets a certain amount of credit depending on what its score is under that program. So that's one approach we discussed. The other approach we sort of floated as what's more like a yardstick approach, where we're not sort of, the analogy there, I guess, is we're not looking at sort of every inch to sort out, but just looking at whether we reach that full yardstick of whether it counts. So, a basic concept there might be that you would say that your credits are really the amount of emission reductions that you receive through the full electrification of one single family home. And there might be some sort of a default or average value used for that. There's a similar kind of concept for small crediting under one of the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources Alternative Portfolio Standard program. But the basic idea there is it's more as simple as sort of you're in or you're out. You either are clean heat or you aren't. And there's an assessment based on that kind of idea. And then you either get credit or you don't get credit. Another example of that is there's a federal program called the Renewable Fuel Standard, which, unlike California, where every type of fuel gets a certain different score, basically either you've qualified for that program or you haven't, and then you get scores for every gallon there. So those are kind of the concepts that we floated. And again, these technical sessions weren't about making decisions or deciding what fuels will qualify, but just about how we might approach this. And we also, as I said, talked about in the discussion document that we need to figure out credit values for partial electrification systems. So that, complicates kind of this question of the yardstick, because we really couldn't probably count those as like a full electrification, but we may want to give those some kind of credit under the program. And, I think we've communicated in those technical sessions, we're not really leaning toward the low carbon fuel standard approach where every different production pathway of biofuels and fossil fuels gets a different sliding scale credit, but that's still, one of the questions we're looking for input on. Next slide. I think we're ready to hear from Emily on the comments we received.
Yes, so in the written comments, we received a lot of commenters that suggested that DEP should base the credit calculations on pre-established methodologies. The two most commonly referenced ones were either the methods used in the existing MassSave energy efficiency programs or the federal GREET model, or similar life cycle analysis approach, such as the low carbon fuel standard that Will just talked about, which adapts the GREET model for California. There was also a lot of comment on whether emissions from electricity generation should be included in the calculation of credit values, and if so, how those emissions should be quantified. And now we can go to the next slide to talk about what we heard in the technical session itself. So there were questions about how you might implement the different crediting approaches, and then some real detailed discussion of the methods of how you might assess electrification related emissions from the electric sector, some discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of using the GREET model, and suggestions on how MassDEP could credit hybrid systems depending on what the fuel used as the backup heating system or the sort of non-electric part of the hybrid system. And then we will provided some specific analytical and data resources, suggestions for DEP to look at, particularly when looking at the grid emissions and hybrid heating system performance. So I'll pass it back to Will.
Thanks. So the last two sessions we had, and this one was a little shorter, but these were the couple other topics that were requested by our stakeholders in the written comments, and things we've certainly been working on internally with our colleagues in state government and elsewhere to get a better handle on. But the topic of MassSave coordination, so how the program would interact with the existing MassSave is the program that already supports electrification of heating through rebates for things like electric heat pumps. So coordination, overlap, and interaction with that program. And then also measure verification refers to how you ensure that the reductions or projects that are being claimed actually happened and are achieving their desired outcome. And we put that in the same session because that's already something that the MassSave program has very much had to deal with. Next slide. So again, I'm presenting information that's we've presented before and is in the documents that we use to guide our creation of these technical sessions. We did want to start by identifying what MassSave is. As I said, they're the basically program that gives rebates, but they're a collaboration of the utilities in Massachusetts, historically been focused on energy efficiency, and they help make those kind of upgrades. Heat pumps are very efficient, so they're in that general category, but MassSave has been certainly broadly focused on energy efficiency for a long time. The Commission on Clean Heat noted that MassSave is now sort of the elephant in the room, the biggest funder of state programs in the building sector that are causing change, and that's funded through ratepayers now through the MassSave program. And finally, in the MassDEP stakeholder discussion document, we had some discussion about verification measures, and we're very aware of and focused that verification can be an administrative burden both for us and for the regulated community and credit generation process. And we're trying to understand, who the right people to be involved in that verification and when there's checks needed and that sort of thing as we look at designing the program. Next slide.
In the written comments about MassSave and measure verification, for the MassSave programs, we heard sort of two main themes. The first was looking at the MassSave methodologies that are already in place for evaluating energy savings and benefits related to various technologies that might be included in the Clean Heat Standard. And then a group of commenters also identified that MassDEP should look at MassSave's experience with equity, and particularly learn from their experience in implementing their programs and how we might address equity in the Clean Heat Standard. In terms of measure verification, commenters were generally supportive of it and talked about the idea of using utility data, third-party verifiers or aggregators. They identified that fraud prevention, consumer privacy, and periodic verification were sort of important things to consider in thinking about measure verification, and then also raised that there's an administrative burden associated with verification. And a few commenters suggested some things about emissions calculations methods that might be associated with measure verification. And then we can go to the next slide for what we heard in the technical session itself. We had some questions about how credit ownership would work for residential customers that complete clean heat projects through MassSave program, so how that might overlap. And then questions about the coordination between the Clean Heat Standard and the existing MassSave program, and then the alternative portfolio standard that Will mentioned that the Department of Energy Resources has, that also provides some crediting for heat pumps currently. One commenter suggested to require aggregations in the Clean Heat Standard because this would streamline sort of marketing and reporting. And there was also a discussion of how web-enabled monitoring tools could help measure verification. So with that, I'll turn it back to Will.
Great, thanks. So I think we're ready to open up for questions, comments, discussion. And I think we're right on time to allow about a half an hour for that. I just want to preface it by saying it's not, our intent with this meeting to revisit detailed technical discussions, although we're happy to do that if people who couldn't or didn't join those sessions need some input. But I want to sort of focus on making sure we give others the opportunity to ask questions. But no firm ground rules here, so we'll go ahead and open it up for questions, comments, and discussion at this point.
From Heather Wyman, AMC Western Mass Conservation, California has lost 1/5 of its carbon forest buffer pool due to wildfires and lack of foresight to account for natural disasters. I hear that the initial planning they implemented was a good example, but between 2015 and 2021, a relatively short period of time, those plans have actually failed to provide a true solution. Additionally, disease needs to be accounted for, and here in Mass, we know that some of our best carbon stores, like the hemlock, are under attack. What are other credits available other than forest sequestering?
Thanks. That's helpful to know that we should be thinking about that in general. I think that question is a little bit beyond the scope of the Clean Heat Standard discussion for today. So I think we'll just take that as input as something that should be on our radar as we think about interaction between heat and fuel sources going forward.
From Tim Johnson, does MassDEP have any idea on the cost that consumer and businesses that sell liquid fuels will bear under the Clean Heat Standard and the increased costs to the residents of Mass, regardless of financial position? Will this be equitable because everyone is affected negatively?
So we haven't done that sort of analysis yet that gets into that in detail. It is correct and true that the Clean Heat Standard would likely include some compliance costs on energy suppliers that would be passed down to consumers. Our next step is putting forth a framework of the program that lays out in a little more detail how it might work. And then once we've gotten comment on that, we would then need to look at that a little more closely. We certainly do understand that's something that more information is needed. We also had a virtual community meetings on equity mechanisms earlier this year that addressed some of that. 'Last month, and that's posted online.
From Michael Ferrante, the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council is about to start the planning process for the next 3-year MassSAVE plan that will begin in early 2025. Is MassDEP going to participate in the EEAC planning process?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Thank you for the question. So yes, the answer is yes. Sharon Weber from the Bureau of Air and Waste is our representative on the EEAC, so she will be participating in that process.
And I would add that those of us working the clean heat standard are certainly taking a more active role of following that process and making sure that we're understanding what's going on, so that we have the tools to make programs that are compatible going forward.
Stephen Dodge, I've asked you to unmute.
Thank you. Just a point I wanted to make about one of the slides, and I've seen this before, and I just think it's an important point to maybe correct on the slides, and also I want to reemphasize the overarching point is that on the hybrid discussion of credits for hybrid systems, you continually say, I think the exact quote on the slide is, hybrid system where a fossil fuel backup system is retained. You can have a credit system where a liquid fuel, non-fossil fuel backup is retained. And I think the presumption on the slide seems to be that the credit program has to be where fossil fuels are still used. Well, as I think you know, B100 is more common and every day in the marketplace. All the major burner manufacturers are certifying their burners and appliances for B100. So you can use liquid fuel as a backup. It doesn't necessarily have to be fossil fuel as a backup, or there should be consideration for higher blends of biomass-based diesel. So I just want to point that out because I've seen it on a bunch of slides. And again, I want to reemphasize the fact that the program doesn't have to include fossil fuels. It can include low carbon or zero carbon liquid fuels. Thank you.
That's helpful. I can provide a little clarification on why I think the backup issue. I think that as far as emission reductions, having a biofuel, I mean, a backup system is presumably one that's not used very much. So whether or not those backup systems are biofuels or fossil fuels, the fact that we'd be getting the reductions mostly from the fact that they're used as backup. So, that's a helpful clarification, but the focus of if we were to use those fuels to reduce emissions, we'd want them used in the systems, I think, that are going to be utilized the most, and not too much focus on holding them in storage and not using them. But thank you for the clarification.
From Tim Johnson, it seems like every meeting never gets into the specifics. Is this by design?
Yes, we are in a process where we understood at the beginning of this that a lot of people had given a lot of thought about this subject going back a couple of years, and there were a number of documents already posted by the state government and others related to this. So we decided the first step, and we're still in this first basic process, was to receive stakeholder input, mostly on a listening posture. We did publish a draft framework that had a lot of detail about what we might do, but it didn't have any details. The design part of that, to address what you're talking about, is we do understand that to really, it's very challenging to participate in such an open-ended process. And so we need to give people something to react to. And that's very much what the framework idea in the fall or later this year would be, is that we would put something out that says, here's what we would do based on what we think now for a clean heat standard, and let people give more focused responses. So yeah, that I think you have the right observation, and that is by design.
Next question is a follow-up from Heather Wyman, and I believe the answer is similar to what you just stated for this last question. I would still like to hear what other credits you are considering.
So I did mention that at the technical meeting, we presented a slide that listed the other credit types that people commented on. So the particular ones that people have commented on are credit for renewable natural gas, hydrogen, there's some comments on the different kind of types of biofuels. I think, I'm not sure if those are the main ones, I think, Emily, unless there's something specific I'm missing out. There were some others like portable systems that probably are of less concern.
Next, we have a 3-part question from Gabrielle Stebbins. One, you have mentioned double dipping. Does this pertain to customers receiving multiple incentives or utilities receiving multiple credits, or both?
I think it could pertain to both. So we have a question, the technical analysis by the Regulatory Assistance Project and our discussion document describes this as, I think one of the concepts is an umbrella policy where sort of everything else going on would count toward compliance. We haven't really sorted out whether there are, and this is one of the technical session kind of questions and something we'll have to make more clear in the framework, whether you can participate in multiple programs and earn multiple incentives or not. There are arguments for allowing that to make sure the most incentive happens, and also that the credit market might sort of adjust for that. If other programs are providing a lot of incentive, then the cost of the credits might not be as much. For example, people are less likely to need ACPs. On the other hand, there may be reasons to limit that. So very much a technical question that we haven't resolved. Did come up a bit on the technical sessions, but we're sort of looking at that as on a program by program basis and trying to sort it out.
Part 2, hybrid heat, you have referred to as leaving the backup system in place. However, during the 2080 proceeding, the consultant E3 often referred to gas hybrid systems. Can you please clarify how you would be referring to these moving forward so it's very understandable?
Yeah, that's another question. I think what I was describing is a system where there would be natural gas or heating oil and electricity heat in the same home, and the electricity heat would be used at least some of the time. The question is, if somebody has a clean heat system and they're not using it all, then they probably shouldn't get much credit just for having it. At the other end of the scale, if they really were to, say, remove themselves from the natural gas system, then they definitely should be counted not as hybrid. But in between, there's some questions that we need to decide about, that we need to make more specific in the framework. And I think pointing out that there's a body of comment in the 2080 docket is helpful for us to think, another thing for us to look into. So thank you.
Can someone please say what the 2080 docket is for those who are not familiar with that, please?
Yeah, sorry. The 2080 docket is a Department of Public Utilities proceeding regarding the future of the natural gas system in Massachusetts in light of the need to decarbonize over time.
Thank you.
And part 3, you mentioned that you aren't leaning towards California's low carbon fuel standard credit approach. Does that mean you are leaning towards a yardstick approach, or just you aren't leaning towards anything at this time?
I think it means of those two approaches, we are leaning more toward a yardstick approach, in that we are leaning something more like whether or not things qualify versus giving a different amount of credit to each thing. But as I said, the other choice you provided is also true, that we haven't made any final decisions. We're open for input on that topic also.
And from Brian Davidson, policy-driven electrification risks disproportionately impacting middle class and low-income residents, with the per household cost of electrification typically much higher in older homes that require retrofitting relative to costs for newly constructed households. Given the concentration of lower income consumers in older homes, the cost of policy-driven electrification will fall more heavily on lower income residents. Additionally, those who are unable to afford electrification will be left to pay for legacy infrastructure systems, e.g. natural gas distribution or heating oil delivery, the cost of which must be recovered from even fewer customers, thereby driving up the price of delivered energy even beyond the added cost potentially incurred through the clean heat standard. A more equitable solution would be to craft a clean heat standard that expands the adoption of drop-in renewable liquid fuels.
Thanks. That's a helpful comment. I think I'm going to not respond to that anymore and just point out that there is the last virtual community meeting did focus on a number of equity mechanisms, not including that particular point. So we're happy to receive that as an additional point. We have certainly heard it before, and welcome additional written comment on that topic also.
That session is available on our website. So
Yes.
we should look at that.
From Tim Johnson, who from the liquid fuel businesses has been involved in drafting these sweeping regulations. Renewable propane is not even considered a clean heat fuel when it is actually cleaner than current mass power. Hybrid systems make a lot of sense and should not be penalized as such. This regulation seems like a copy of Vermont's deal. This is a real mess.
Thanks. Again, I'd point out there's a written comment opportunity coming up, and we have several hundred pages of written comments from various parts of the fuels industry posted on our website that we're considering. So we are aware of that topic. We've focused less on propane because it's a relatively small part of our fuel supply, even compared to Vermont. But we certainly, we understand it's part of the picture and are interested to learn more about that.
At the first part of the question about who has been involved in the drafting the regulations, we're not at the point yet where we're drafting regulations, but I will note that there were representatives from the liquid fuels business on the Clean Heat Commission. So that commission recommended that we move forward with clean heat standard. But our goal is to make sure that we're involving all stakeholders in that process.
For Michael Ferrante, given that a clean heat standard will drive up the price of natural gas, does MassDEP expect that they will need DPU approval to move forward with the standard?
I think that might be beyond the scope of this meeting, but in general, we wouldn't look at a DEP regulation as something that would need DEP approval. I'm sorry, DPU approval.
I'm not seeing any additional raised hands or questions right now.
Great, well, that's okay. We are sort of ending our first phase of comments, so we'll pause a little bit extra here just to make sure we're not missing anything.
And we also have another session today at 6 p.m. So
Very good. Yeah.
continue this this round of sessions tonight at 6.
I think I see a raised hand.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, you.
Hi, just a real quick point of clarification. The comment period due at the end of August is kind of for additional comments that you haven't got through technical sessions and the listening sessions, but that's just based on the framework we have to date. There is nothing else that has come out that should be being reviewed. It's a question. And then my understanding is based on all these comments, you will come out with a draft and there will be opportunities for comments after that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great question to close out the meeting. And I would also say that people that have submitted written comments already on the discussion document, we will continue to consider those. So those are part of, the record. If you've changed your mind and you don't want us to do what you suggested earlier, you might want to resubmit comments, but we're just at this point trying to, when we published the draft framework, we knew that we were not doing it ideally because we published a dense written document before really talking to people. So the purpose of these sessions over the summer is to sort of, if people that maybe missed that deadline or couldn't really put together a response, if you have additional things you want to add to that record of comments before September 1st, then that would be helpful. And then what I expected next is we post those comments. We would post a summary if we follow what we did last time. And then at that point, use the word framework. We don't refer to what we already put out as a framework, but a discussion document. We would put out something that's more like a framework, which would be more details of what, if we didn't get any more comment, what we would probably do with a clean heat standard. There'd be another round of comment on that, but that's still not a regulation. Then after that, to bring any of this into being, we'd have to propose and finalize regulations, and that would occur, after that next comment process. I don't know, Christine, if you have anything you want to add to that, but it's definitely a helpful question to get at this point.
No, I think that's great. I echo Will's comment about good question. Our goal is to make sure that we have a robust stakeholder process, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're taking comments through every step of the process. There's again more opportunity to comment once we put out the draft program framework, which will take all of your input and have a little more detail for folks to comment on, and we will continue to take your questions and answer your questions, given that this is a complex topic, and we want to make sure that folks are able to provide the input that we are looking for, and that you understand what we're looking for.
Actually, looks like we have some more chat items.
From Ted Noonan, given that, is there an update on the overall timeline of potential implementation?
I don't think there's an update. We've said as early as 2024 in the past. We certainly won't have the entire program up and running at the beginning of 2024, possibly, late in 2024 in time for that heating system. The program also may be sort of phased in multiple rulemakings. We have a reporting regulation that'll come out first that'll give us some information that may be helpful. So there's no real update on the schedule, except as we're still, hoping to make good progress in 2024 as directed in the Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2050.
Eve Torrey, so the end of August is discussion document comments.
Any comments you have at this stage, including, we already had a round of comments on the discussion document, but if there are additional comments on that or anything that follows from that or any of the meetings we've had or anything anybody else wants to comment on.
And from June Wooding, when are you looking to propose and finalize the regulation?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to what I said before.
And I'm not seeing any additional comments or raised hands.
We'll give it another minute. Yep, we'll give it another minute and then we can close out. But before we do that, we've had really great attendance at all of these meetings, particularly today. We'll be back again tonight for another session. And we do appreciate all of your comments, and we are considering all of them as we move forward with the next phase, which is to put out the draft program framework. And we will take comments at any time, which can be sent to the Climate Strategies email.
Yeah, next slide, Josh.
And we've said in previous calls, if you have folks that you think are not getting these notices of these sessions, please have them sign up for our email list, and we will get them on the list and get the meetings out, materials out to them as well.
Comment from Tim Johnson, seems like a burdensome program since we are seeing heat pumps and conservation programs put in place that are working.
Thanks, that's a Helpful comment.
And from Carrie Catan, thank you for your work on lowering building emissions.
That's a helpful comment too. I think we're ready to say thank you to all of you. We really do appreciate all the back and forth and input we've received.
Great, thank you. I think we can end now, and we may see some of you this evening. And then thank you again for your participation. Very valuable.